While rereading Agrippa for the VR Mystery School lectures that I have done, I realized how little information there is on the lunar mansions, specifically working with them in a Western context. So today we will be talking about the lunar mansions and giving the Queen and Gate of the Heavens her due. I am Dave the Amateur Magus. On this channel I talk all about the mechanics behind ceremonial magic, occultism, esotericism, and the mechanics behind everything you can find within a dusty old grimoire. On today's episode we will be talking about the lunar mansions from the Western context. If you would like to support the channel, go to the description below and subscribe to the Patreon, where you get exclusive access to videos early, as well as Patreon exclusive videos in the Occultic Manual series, which is a monthly write-up about a particular topic that I want to talk about related to occultism and esotericism, usually from a practical and more intermediate perspective. Okay, so let's talk about the lunar mansions. The lunar mansions are interesting. The lunar mansions, according to the ancients, there are either 27 or 28. The Vedic system, which is the Indian system, uses 27. However, for the majority of cases, you're going to be seeing they're going to be listing 28. Now, these are going to be the 28 mansions listed in the Picatrix, and by extension, Agrippa. We will, of course, be talking about the lunar mansions in Agrippa, which is listing the 28 lunar mansions. He gets this from the Picatrix, more or less, and from various other places. This is going to be very similar, and the lunar mansions in the Western ceremonial system are really taken from the Arabic system, and mostly the Picatrix as a whole. So, when the moon is going through the zodiac, it takes about 28 days, and every day is considered to be one of the lunar mansions. Now, mathematically speaking, the lunar mansions are a little bit smaller than 13 degrees for each of the different zodiac signs, and the first one begins at exactly the same place that 0 degrees Aries begins, and the 7th one ends where the final 30th degree of Gemini ends. So if it would be, the 1st degree of Cancer starts the 8th, and so on and so forth. This gives us 7 lunar mansions per quarter of the zodiac. So Aries through Gemini has 7, Cancer through Virgo has 7, continuing on through Libra through Sagittarius, 7, and the final 7 are Capricorn through Pisces. And this continues, and after it goes back from Pisces, it goes right back to the first one that is in Aries. Now, this should be fairly simple. This is just how a circle works. And each of these lunar mansions are given their own power, and there's 28 of them, and their powers differ wildly. It's not going to be the case of, oh, this is going to be useful for love. Well, you might have one that's useful for love and going on trips or journeys. Or you might have one that is good for love and destroying the reputation of politicians, a la the 7th one, which is the tail end of Gemini. Now, this is going to be interesting because this gives a lot more depth and complexity to the practices associated with the moon. Because, while yes, you might be, oh, yeah, the moon is in a bad sign for this, but the lunar mansion is perfect. That can occasionally happen, and it really causes an interesting thing when you look at it, because when looking at the lunar mansions, I started to realize that just because the moon is in a poor sign for what you want to do with it, might not necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. So the way it usually works is if the moon is in the proper sign, that's good for what you're doing. But if it's in the lunar mansion for what you're doing, that means that the moon also has the powers of those lunar mansions. So let's look at some examples. So, hypothetically, I am just using Agrippa's interpretations of the lunar mansion here. And when I'm using Agrippa's interpretations of the lunar mansion, I need to make sure that I'm using these same things. So, keep in mind that if you are going to use a different source, Stephen Skinner's Complete Magician's Tables, he will list other interpretations of these. Now, I am going to, for the sake of this video, ignore those, despite the fact that those are really useful, and they do also include a degree and minute section for when those signs and when the lunar mansions actually begin. So I am just going to say that while if I was doing this on my own, I would be looking at Stephen Skinner's Complete Magician's Tables, as well as various other notes from others' books, such as the Shams al-Marith. I am not going to mention those here. I am just going to take what Agrippa says, and we're going to look at Agrippa. That being said, you should definitely do what I just said, and you should probably look in different books, because if you're cross-referencing different books, it just gives you a better understanding. And sometimes things mentioned in other books will be contradictory to what Agrippa says, and vice versa. So you want to... knowledge is power, become powerful. That's what I'm saying. So, hypothetically speaking, I want to work with the 11th lunar mansion, which is going to be in Leo, and it says that it is used for travel and for gain from merchandise, as well as rescuing prisoners. Now, if I was going to use this, you need to remember that when you use this power of the lunar mansion, the powers of this lunar mansion are given to the moon. So suddenly, all of a sudden, the moon might be in Leo, but it suddenly becomes good for travel, which is typically a Sagittarius correspondent thing. It also becomes good to gain from merchandise, which is to say sales. This is when you're trying to sell things. That means that generally speaking, you're going to be a better, the powers of the moon are better for selling things at this time, and rescuing prisoners is not really something we need to do in modern day, but it's here. Now, there are also characters, which is to say sigils, and angels associated with these particular lunar mansions. For those of you who know my content, you know where this is going. So, hypothetically speaking, let's say we wanted to use this to make sure our trip is fun, enjoyable, and we got paid for it. Maybe we're going to a convention and we want to stack all of this stuff, right? What I would do is I would work with the moon, ideally on a Monday, because moon on Monday, moon on Moon Day, and I would do it when this particular planet is in the 11th lunar mansion, because if it's in the 10th, won't work. If it's in the 11th, or if it's in the 12th, it won't work. But if it's in the 11th lunar mansion, that's when it works. Now, you can also inscribe on a candle the particular seal or character from Agrippa of this particular lunar mansion, which I would do in a purple candle. And you can also, if you wanted to be really spicy, call up the particular planetary spirit for Gabriel and ask them to bring you the angel of the lunar mansion, because that is how I would do it. Now, am I saying this is how you have to work with these things? No. I just really like talking to spirits, and I really like candle magic, so this is how I would do it. You might want to go ahead and on that particular day when the moon is in that particular sign, and it's worth noting, you actually don't need to worry about planetary hours and planetary days as long as the moon is in void, of course. With the lunar mansions, is my understanding. You just need to worry about, is the moon in the particular lunar mansion? Okay. Is it in a particularly good phase of the moon? Yes. Okay. I can just work with that lunar mansion. It is entirely up to you. Now, what if you wanted to go ahead and learn more about what you can apply these lunar mansions for? Well, I would obviously go ahead and I would personally wait until the moon is in the proper lunar mansion, and I would evoke the angel and ask them, because they're going to know best. Now, according to Agrippa, this is going to be the angel who is in charge of the particular lunar mansion is going to be the angel who is best to ask, or you can ask other occultists who have worked with it, or you can find different reference books. I mentioned the Shams al-Marith, I mentioned Stephen Skinner, and I mentioned Agrippa all in this video. You should read all three of those and come to your own conclusions, because knowledge is power. Now, am I going to actively throw these into my rituals? It depends on the mood I'm in. Pardon the pun. It's going to depend on the mood I'm in, and it's going to depend on if I plan on experimenting. I might just do a full month where I just try to work with the lunar mansions and just see how that works. I might particularly find that I really jive with some lunar mansions, or that my magic really kicks off much better in particular lunar mansions than others. Now, that is something that is going to be personal to me, and you might have different things that you're going to resonate with on your own. In your own life, you might find that you just really don't like working with the moon other than this is not something that you find to be useful to your practice, and you really would rather just ignore it because it's not really for you, is a good way to put it. And you know what? If that is you, if you are one of those people, kudos to you, and good on you for recognizing when something isn't for you. That being said, I'm going to experiment with the Lunar Mansions more at some point. You might see a follow-up video if that ends up happening. But for now, I have been Dave, the Amateur Magus. Hope you have learned something new and hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Patreon down in the link below and share this video out with people you think might enjoy it. If you're watching this on the Patreon, you have my thanks for your continued and ongoing support once again, and hope everyone is having a good day. And if you're not having a good day, hope your day gets better. Take it easy.